Hello, everyone. Illinois is in a deep freeze right now, but there is one thing that never seems to get frozen, even as politicians make promises to do so, and that is your property taxes. Welcome to In the Spotlight, where we interview experts to connect dots for voters on important policies that affect their lives. In just 2 months, many of you will go back to the voting booth again and vote for local office holders who will determine nearly 100% of your property tax bill. Today, I'm putting one of the people on the forefront of the fight to reform Illinois' property tax system in the spotlight. Warren Dixon is the Naperville Township Assessor and a thought leader on common sense property tax reform. Listen in as we discuss how the property market is changing in Illinois and what that means for your taxes, how our property tax system has gotten so screwed up, and what we can do about it. Warren, thank you for joining me.
Jeanne, it's great to be back with you today.
Well, you know what? Let's just cut to the chase, Warren. Not long ago, you actually posted a picture of a residential home with essentially a tsunami of money flowing over it. And in that picture, you actually wrote this. You said, "Is the shift of Illinois teachers' pensions to local districts on the horizon for Illinois property owners in 2021? Will this be the only way Springfield can free up needed funds for the city of Chicago?" So tell me, Warren, what did you mean with the picture and with that comment? What's coming up?
Well, Jeanne, there's a lot going on in the use of real estate and the demand for real estate across our country, and especially here in Illinois. Many of you have noticed since the pandemic came in full effect in March that many of the train stations have been empty, that you have not traveled to your major places of employment, your offices. The city of Chicago, specifically, one of the largest, our third largest city in the United States, has been a ghost town for most individuals down there. And the demand for the office space, in essence, is changing. Our models have been changing prior to the pandemic, and we've accelerated that experiment here with the current pandemic that's going on now. Offices, employers are seeing productivity be reached at home officing, work from home. And the employees are as much enjoying the work from home as the employers are. The employers are seeing reduced costs in electricity, particularly they're going to see reduced in the space that they need in renting that space. With that comes some pressures on the real estate system that's highly dependent upon a balance between commercial and residential properties here in the state of Illinois. Our property tax system that funds local governments is dependent upon this real estate value, and as that value drops, Jeanne, in Illinois, that the share of what those commercial properties shoulder is in essence coming, and that is the wave that you saw in the picture that is coming, not only in a shift, but as the city of Chicago starts to economically die with the demand of what's there. The only option that a lot of those local governments, specifically the city of Chicago and the units housed in it, will have to do is go to Springfield and ask for more money to keep that particular model alive. And we believe that their only option there is left is a pension shift. And we think that pension shift would could potentially come this year. And if not, it's going to be within a short period of time.
So there's a couple things that we really should go into a little bit more detail on. First of all, in 2014, when I was a sitting state representative, Mike Madigan suggested a pension shift, and that never did happen. But essentially is saying that the pensions that are paid for at the state level should actually come back to the local level, and where the salaries are meted out in public contracts, that the pensions should be paid to there. But if that were to happen, there would be an enormous increase in property taxes to pay for these enormous pensions that we have. So as the state loses money, has no place to go when they have $10 billion in pensions that they pay, the costs that they pay every year in their budget, almost 25% of their budget goes to pensions every year. If they need to free up money because other revenue is not coming in and they've taken on additional debt that needs to be serviced, you're saying the easiest thing for them to do is to offshore some of the the yearly cost of pensions to the local level, which would increase property taxes.
Well, Jeannie, as a former legislator, you know that a lot of the current budget is via court decree right now. So
That's
there's
right.
only a few options left for the legislature to move dollars to support the functions of the city of Chicago. Not only the city of Chicago with the loss of real estate value, will also lose as individuals don't come in from world markets to visit this large major city, and this is happening across the world. The sales tax goes down, the hotel tax goes down, the motor fuel tax goes down, the tolls go down, and they're proportionally cut with the demand for being in that area. And these local governments do not have the funds to do it. And we know that the only option outside of that court decree is to eventually ask to shift the pensions back from the state of Illinois back to the local school districts, which they're not aligned with. And so that's inherently an issue, has been discussed, is negotiating the front end contracts without the back end responsibilities.
That's right.
Many of us believe we should be aligned, but with that is what we might face down in that wave again of a probably maybe the most historical increase in property taxes in Illinois history, if not the United States, when they do shift those pensions back.
Well, so the second part of this, though, is you've got two things. One, a potential pension shift to free up state money in the budget to do things that they're supposed to be doing. So that's one thing. The second thing, though, is at the same time, you have this decrease in commercial property. I know we've talked about this. We've been talking about this together, actually, for 10 years. And in 2006, you like to remind people that in Naperville itself, the commercial property assessment dropped precipitously because of the 2008 and 09 recession. You saw a massive shift in the levy going from commercial to residential. Could you talk about that more? Because that is what actually is going to happen when you get headlines like Uber wants to offload more space in the old post office. I mean, when you see, if you also see headlines like Macy's Water Tower Place faces its biggest challenge since the North Michigan Avenue Mall opened. So you've got these problems with commercial property literally everywhere, not just in the city of Chicago. And when commercial property cannot sustain the property tax levy, it moves. It doesn't just go away. These local governments don't stop levying taxes. It goes to the residents.
Absolutely, Jeannie. So back in 2014, when we started some of this conversation and talking about the 2008 real estate collapse and the fallout of what we had, we understood, and I think most of your listeners here will, the largest driver in property taxes in the state of Illinois is not the local governments per se that put taxes out, but it's how that is shouldered.
That's
right? So communities like Naperville that has had inherently a pretty good balanced plan of balancing their commercial tax base to their residential tax base to shoulder their cost, where other communities have not done as well. In 2008, they saw a big pullback in the demand for that real estate, and in essence, the value of it dropped substantially from about 40% down to about 33%. Today, before pandemic, we were down in the 20% range. So that's about 23%. Wow. So this model that we've seen, and many of you are participants in the new model with online shopping, buying groceries, buying your goods through online services, the demands for retail and the demands for work at home, this new experiment that everybody just was thrown into, has now worked out fairly well. And what we see most of the time is that most experts that I consult with are now estimating that there'll be a 40% minimum reduction in the current lease space that we see downtown, and we see in some of the larger communities with commercial bases. And so we see that pullback. As that pullback happens, it's just like a balloon. We're just pushing. Those commercial properties are shouldering a lot of that local cost, your local school district, your local municipal, your local park districts. And as that value or that demand decreases, so does the value, and it's like a balloon. We push that balloon down, and it pushes the cost back onto highly the residential parcels, which are the greatest number, but also our remaining businesses that are critical to our communities.
That's right.
So
Anybody who stays behind essentially ends up with more of a burden. So this is why we've always talked about you have to have a thriving business community to help drive everything else that makes it economical to live in a state or in a place. But you can't just have a bunch of residents paying onto the property tax base. A good contrast here is, and on Wheaton City Council, we used to know in Wheaton's a very unique place. We don't have warehousing. We don't have any car dealerships anymore. We lost all of those. So we're really a bedroom residential community. 23% of our property is off the tax rolls. That includes Wheaton College, the county complex, parks, golf clubs, you name it, all the schools. So we're unique in that way. So residents really do get hammered in Wheaton specifically. So every town's a little bit different. But when you lose commercial base, when you lose that economic activity, you really hurt the residents that are left behind. Let's be clear here. What is the direction of property in the state of Illinois? Because you have competing headlines from Cranes that say new home sales plummet in the city, but they surge in the suburbs. So suburban people are looking at this and they're saying, hey, you know what? Those 3 bedrooms are selling at that right price range immediately with competing offers. That's probably not going to last. What do you think?
No, I think there's a couple things going on. First off, we're seeing the transfer of where individuals want to be, that the need for the big city is not there with the work from home and others, and individuals are first taking what I call a first step out to the suburban areas for what's left. We also are at record low inventory across the United States, and particularly here in Illinois. And that always begs a question: why do we have low inventory? And there's a lot of confusing conversation to that. There's a lot of folks cheering on because price is driving up, right? It's a supply and demand question. When there's a low supply, okay, and there's a higher demand, the price is going up, and that's what we're seeing right now. We have very low interest rates, cheap money, and we have individuals that can move from larger urban centers like Chicago or even townhome apartment and move up to some of the single family stock. And we're seeing that happen there. And that's driving up the cost. The bigger question, Jeannie, is why is the inventory? Why do we have such a low amount of inventory? In my professional opinion, I believe that the low inventory is due to uncertainty in the market. And so these individuals that have been in, these families that are in a pandemic situation, they don't know if that employer is going to bring them back, or if they're going to continue to work from home, or they're going to have a hybrid portion of that where they work some days here and some days at home. Some families just don't know if they're going to have a job left after this. Right. So unfortunately, we're heading into some things that are also driving us very fastly in AI, artificial intelligence, automations that are starting to change how employers are utilizing individuals. And so we're particularly seeing more of our white-collar jobs that are starting to be automated. And this is driving down the affordability and the opportunities for individuals. So I believe by the time that some of the stimulus works its way through, we're going to see a reversal of this, and we're going to see a big shift of a lot of inventory on the market as people come to know their situations a lot more. As we come out of the pandemic, we have decisions that have to be made by employers, okay, and that the employees are driving this model as much as the employers now. I think we'll see a big burst in inventory. That big supply will drive down cost, and if we combine that with what we just talked about, is shifts of cost onto there, we'll be competing from an affordability position with other areas of the country like Nashville and Las Vegas and the Carolinas and these areas, Florida and others, that are much more affordable now, and being able to be mobile, right, we have the opportunities for those.
Well, we're going to get to that in our second segment, or in our third segment about this, but really the second thing I want to talk about is that property taxes are really important to our school system, especially in the state of Illinois. On average, only 36% of your funding for schools comes from the state at all. And in terms of your property taxes, well over 70% of your property taxes in the suburbs at least goes to your local school. So one of the most important things that, especially for suburban taxpayers to know, is that it's hyper important that the assessments are fair across the state, because the state school funding formula is super dependent on assessments being fair. Now, you have been a champion on this, because as an assessor, you don't levy the taxes. Warren and all the other assessors don't determine how much is what the tax levy is going to be, how much is going to get taxed. They determine on whether or not those levies are fairly put across all the property, commercial, residential, industrial, whatever. So you have a big job in making sure that it's fair. And back in 2015, Warren, you came up with a chart, and we have a copy of it here. You'll see it. And it was the top 12 sales in the city of Chicago. And what you noted about them is that, first of all, they were only assessed at 42% of their value at the time of sale, and that 7 of the 12 of them were represented by Speaker Madigan's law firm, which is notorious for getting really great deals on property tax assessments for his clients. So could you talk a little bit more about that? Because your report, honestly, I think was the reason that ProPublica then came out 2 years later in 2017 and wrote a trilogy of articles published in the Chicago Tribune called The Tax Divide, and really highlighted the inequities in the assessment system. So even if we have to deal with high property taxes in the state, we want to be assessed fairly, and that is not what was happening. So, and you have been really on the forefront of reform to make sure that this is fair for everybody.
Well, Jeanne, that's the reason I came into assessing out of the private sector, and what I felt was an opportunity here in Illinois to fairly and equitably distribute local cost through property taxes. And that's what we do as assessors. Me and my fellow assessors, there's 900 assessment jurisdictions in Illinois here. And our job is to fairly and equitably value all those parcels with that, so that we can share value, we can share the local cost according to value, or what we like to say ad valorem property taxes. And that was an opportunity that I saw to serve on the public side of things. And as you and I have had the opportunity to work together, and other legislators in Springfield during the time, we realized this was the assessment system was inherently inequitable. There was a mass amount of inequities. The assessment system was legislated to be inequitable, setting up 900 assessment jurisdictions in Illinois, with Texas being the second closest to us with 254 jurisdictions. So in essence, we created a very underqualified assessment component, meaning we underfund a lot of assessment offices, assessors that are really trying to do the best job that they can, but we set them up for failure by not providing them the resources to, one, get in there to do it, two, to have the equipment to do it, and three, to have the staff to be accurately able to set those values and defend those values.
Well, just a little side note there. I know when they were arguing about the new school funding formula, I knew that the basis for all fair funding would be fair assessments. And I had a superintendent in front of me at the time in a committee hearing, and he said, well, Representative Ives, you are right about that. Our county hasn't been reassessed for 30 years. They had not done. And you're supposed to be reassessed every 4 years at a minimum. So, they had not done a reassessment for over 30 years. And subsequently, I sent a letter to Illinois Department of Revenue and found out that at least 50 assessors were not qualified for the positions that they had. And so if we don't have fair assessments, how come, people feel like they've been cheated, truthfully?
So, Jeanne, we live in a world today that talks a lot about fairness and equality, right?
That's
equity.
Right.
And, that's really, when we're doing this, is we're talking about how we're sharing the burden. And if we overburden someone inequitably, we are basically stealing from those individuals as we undervalue some of the other ones. So what I always like to talk about, and we spent some time doing this, and it was a little unbelievable that we were met by both sides of the aisle at that particular time with a lack of wanting to reform and modernize the system just to provide equity to the taxpayers to share the cost. We inherently saw that the south and southwest suburbs of Cook County were experiencing an overvaluation, and these are typically more of our lower income minority communities in there, and they were being overassessed, while a larger portion of our North Shore and our Loop properties were being undervalued. Reference to the spreadsheet that you said, where some of our larger buildings like Trump Tower or like the Sears Willis Tower and these other ones were being undervalued to the tune of about 43%. And so that did two things. That made someone shoulder their value more the burden than the other. But as you and I know too, that one of the primary components in a very long formula is the equalized assessed valuation, or local available resources. So the understating in certain areas allowed for disproportionate funding from the state of Illinois through the school funding formula to areas. So in essence, areas like Wheaton and Naperville, St. Charles and others were paying their local taxes, were paying for their schools, while their income taxes were paying for other areas that were disproportionately put there.
That's right. So when I actually do say, listen, you're paying for two school systems, you're paying for your Wheaton school district and you're paying for Chicago, that's not inaccurate at all. And to this date, they still have not fixed the issues with the assessment system.
They haven't, and so we championed this with, as we were met with silence in Springfield. I wasn't done yet, and I decided that I had an opportunity to present this case in public opinion, and we did that through a great writer at the Chicago Tribune with ProPublica, and in essence through a 3-part series in the Chicago Tribune on the inequities, and we brought to light, along with this gentleman that did a lot of research to come up with this article, 3-piece article. At the same time, we had an individual that was starting to realize exactly what this was, and this is kind of a funny case because, you know, I'm a middle of the road conservative, and I met with my good friend and now Cook County Assessor Fritz Kagi, which is a progressive Democrat, and we met together on fair and equitable assessments, and really that only the purpose was that Fritz Kagi, now the assessor, was this brought some interest to him. He wanted to run for the assessor just based on this particular issue alone. He did a great job at communicating it. And then together we have consulted together, we've worked together, and Fritz has continued to do a great job in an effort to modernize the assessment system and to bring equity back to that. Now, he's met by the challenges of the property tax appeal industry that you mentioned, which really works on the side of individual property owners, and there's a right place for that. But what we found in Illinois is that there's just not an opposite side to that, meaning that the taxpayer doesn't, the assessors are in the middle, the property tax appeal side of things, industry has communications with the assessment jurisdictions, but really where is the representation for the taxpayer? And in my next adventure here, we're going to be moving into some of that where we give representation to the local property taxpayers through the local government. So checks and balances. If they want to make a change, well, that's great if it's within the range of value. So we look to bring back fairness and equity. We make sure that we want to make sure Fritz and I continue to fight that all properties are on, so that we continue as more if properties are omitted, that'll drive up the rate on everybody else, and someone won't be sharing. So we see a lot of lack of permits getting to assessment jurisdictions. We see omitted properties. We see other things that happen, and we're saying that modern technologies today give us no excuse to not modernize this system and to be able to provide a fair and equitable tax base.
Well, bottom line, though, is that your assessments can be spot on. You can be fair across the board with every single homeowner, every single commercial property owner. But at the end of the day, still, we switch off all the time between Illinois and New Jersey as being the most expensive place to own property. We have the highest property tax rates. I mean, I pulled this up from Wallet Hub, who's done this study a number of times. And here they have New Jersey at 2.47% effective tax rate, Illinois at 2.3%. If you look at the median number, you know, who's at number 25 across the states, it's 0.91%. So you're looking at well over 2 times the property tax rate as the average across the nation. And so this is, and you look at people look at Tennessee. Now Tennessee has the highest sales tax rate, and they have one of the lowest 10 property tax rates, and they have no state income tax. Yet they have schools and roads and police and fire and you name it. So this is more of the decision that people are making. And while the assessments need to be fair, we all agree with that. I mean, overall, we have really an issue with high property taxes, which do the inverse of adding value to your property over time. They erode value to your property.
That's correct, Jeannie. Every time we add another dollar to our property tax, we devalue the asset that individuals have in their home. And we see Illinois, as I get to talk from north to south and east to west in the state, dealing with what are the impacting factors of why these property taxes are increasing. And we know that what we just talked about previously, that the change in the loss of the business climate here in Illinois and the demand for commercial real estate, both in commercial and industrial properties, as that diminishes, we see property value go up. But we also know the local cost of government is growing, right, correctly. And we see that the local cost of government, even in down markets, continue to grow. So the big thing back in 2008, as you referenced before, was up until that point, most individuals had seen property values increase, and they correlated that with the assessments. So the calls were a lot to myself as an assessor and my fellow assessors. Well, why did the property taxes go up? Well, because your property value went up. But we went through a bit of an education in 2008 as the property values declined, and we saw them come down. Now people said, well, property value is decreasing. Why are my taxes still going up, correct? And what they started to re-educate themselves, and why my office today has very little calls in regards to property tax, not just being transparent, but because of this reason that this happened, was they now made the correlation that local costs are what's driving property taxes, and that assessors are just the valuation or the appraisal end of this thing. So what we're seeing, why we're seeing higher and higher property taxes in Illinois is as you see out migration, and you see instead of some growth going on, we're losing in manufacturers, we're losing commercial properties. We're not as business friendly. And this can go anywhere from our workers' comp rates to other things that make us competitive with our surrounding, particularly our Midwest surrounding competitors. We're losing that tax base, and that's really shifting off there. As we lose population, we don't sell as many cars. We don't sell as much goods and surpluses, gas. The tolls aren't used. People don't come here as much and travel to see their families. All those things proportionally go down, and they have to reach further for property taxes.
Well, I do want to give a shout out to Barrington Hills and Mayor Marty McLaughlin, who for the last 7 years has decreased his property tax levy, saving over 25% on that levy over those 7 years, which is, so it can be done. It's just you have to have the right people in office that are going to make those changes. I think school boards, though, are notorious for taxing to the max and saying, I got to capture some growth. Whatever they mean by that. And I think with a declining student population, there's savings that people are going to expect to have over time. And so it's government is, to me, out of control in the state of Illinois at all levels for the most part, and they're going to have to rein it in if we're going to continue to be a haven for at least some people to come here and live.
Well, Jeannie, you referenced some good examples of good government, and then there's other examples of government that has its own challenges. We in Naperville have a fairly decent model of our leadership, and has moved forward with accumulating a large amount of sales tax to offset property taxes. That is a great story to be told, is the balance there. But now they're fighting the challenges of the eroding models of what the real estate market has. We have other one thing we didn't mention in the school side of things is that as population declines in certain areas, the formula that we stated, that how you get funding is based on the accurate valuation of it, and we particularly want that, so we make sure that everybody gets the right proportion of funding. But the new funding formula, as we know, was drawn with a hold harmless clause in there. So you can have areas of the state of Illinois that will massively reduce in student population, not incurring the cost that they need. And then at the same time, we cannot cut the funding from the formula to do that. So this is going to be a whole process that we need to look at holistically to become more business friendly, to promote the balance of commercial industrial, probably being competitive, changing our models, welcoming in the businesses that are growing, and looking at our revenue side of things from there. So,
well, I think we need to have a whole nother segment on the school funding formula. It's completely intertwined with the property tax assessment system. The hold harmless, for example, since you brought it up, it means that Chicago is going to get the same amount of state funding regardless of losing 15,000 students in 1 year. That's a massive outmigration of students, the same amount of funding. And when that happens, if those students move to the suburbs, you're not getting more. So
Jeanne, I think we're cheering on the same thing. We're cheering on. We want to cheer on the growth of the commercial base, and we're not cheering on anything but that. But we also, at the same time, realize that if the model changes, that we need flexibility, and we need to be able to change with that so we can fairly create a competitive and affordable environment to drive business back here, to drive people back to this great state of Illinois that we have, and to do that. So, and I think, unfortunately, that's what people have been, why they're driving out. It's not as affordable. Businesses don't want to come here. And if our leaders and our legislator would realize that if they could do that, we could start to move forward. So, thanks.
Yep. Thank you for coming. Being business friendly is job number one, I think, for all of our elected officials in this state. So thank you, Warren, for coming on my program and being in the spotlight on property taxes.
Thank you, Jeannie.